This is Gayle from Bernina of Naperville, and today we are using the Bernette 38 and the Bernette 37. We're going to cover stitch selection and basic operation of the machine, and hopefully we're going to be giving you some inspiration to put towards your projects. So without further ado, let's get started. So in today's lesson, we are going to learn how to use the Bernette 37 and the Bernette 38. We're going to do most of our stitching on the Bernette 38, which is right here at the right of your screen, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the differences and how to select stitches on the Bernette 37. But keep in mind, they thread just the same, the bobbin loads just the same, but they have a slightly different interface. Start with winding a bobbin. So you have 4 bobbins with your Bernette 37 and your Bernette 38, and the bobbin winding is going to be just the same. So let's go ahead and get started with winding a bobbin. So the first thing that we need to do is put the thread on the machine. Now you'll notice that I've got this Mettler thread here. I'm going to do some decorative stitching, and one of my favorite products to use is this Mettler Silk Finish 100% cotton thread that is 40 weight. It really does make a nice decorative stitch. So with the thread, it's going to go on horizontally, and typically you would use a spool cap, which is this. Also, on this machine, you want to use a little felt pad, and that comes with the machine. It looks like this, and we're just going to put that right on our spool pin. Now I'm going to put the thread on, and you might have to poke that sticker that's on the thread. There we go. There we go. And now I'm going to put the spool cap on. So our thread's on, and now the next thing is to pull the thread off the spool. And on the Bernette 37 and the Bernette 38, the thread path for the bobbin is indicated by a dotted line, and the thread path for the needle is indicated by a solid line. So we're just going to pull the thread off the spool and immediately come around here to our bobbin tensioner, which is that guy right there. Did you notice how I grabbed the thread right there and just kind of flossed that bobbin tensioner? That's how you're going to need to do it at home. Now I'm going to feed my thread through the little hole at the top of this bobbin. And we're going from in the bobbin out through the hole. There we go. And then the bobbin plops right down on the bobbin winder, and we're going to engage this by pushing the bobbin lever over to the side. And on this particular model, you're going to see that it's even telling you, hey, you've got your bobbin on, why don't you go ahead and press your foot control. So I'm going to hold up the thread, and I'm going to press on my foot control. And now, do you see this sliding motor speed right here? I can adjust how fast or slow I want to wind my thread. And a little tidbit for you, polyester thread likes to wind slower than cotton thread because polyester tends to tighten up when it relaxes. So if you want to avoid some puckery seams, wind your bobbin a little bit slower when you're using polyester thread. Now I'm going to stop and trim my little tail, and now I'm going to continue until the bobbin is full. Now, if you had just a small project, you wouldn't have to wait for the bobbin to be full. You could just stop pressing the foot control and then take your bobbin off. But we're going to wind it full because I want you to see what happens once it's full. All right, do you see how the bobbin has stopped winding? The machine is still making like a little bit of a noise. We're going to go ahead, and that's the indication that this bobbin is full. So I'm taking my foot off the foot control, and now I'm just going to snip, and my bobbin is full and ready to be loaded down in the bobbin area. I've zoomed in on the bobbin area for you, and the first thing I want you to notice is that our bobbin door shows us the threading path for the bobbin. It also has our seam allowance markings, 1/8 of an inch, 3/8, 5/8. So that can be helpful for you when you're learning to sew. But notice that bobbin, it's gonna go in with the thread coming down from the left side. I like to think of that as P, a lowercase p for putting it in. But you can obviously think of it however you want that can help you remember. So I'm dropping that down in there, and I'm gonna slide this. There's a little groove right there. So I'm sliding my thread under there, and I'm just pulling and gently encouraging that thread to go to the back of the machine. Then I'm gonna slip my cover, my bobbin cover back on. It goes in like this, and it pushes down. Now, when you wanna take it off, there's a little clip right here, and there's a little arrow showing you. You're gonna push it this direction, and you slip it off. So that's pretty easy. And now that our bobbin's done, it's time to thread the needle. Let's do that. We're gonna undo our thread from the bobbin tensioner. We're gonna make sure that our bobbin winder is back in the non-engaged position. And then we're gonna follow these solid lines. And I like to hold the thread just a little bit. And I also like to thread the machine with the presser foot up. Now it is up now, but there's a little presser foot lifter to the side of the machine where you're gonna wanna lift it up if the presser foot isn't up. Now we're gonna go down through here, down through the tension discs, under this little guide to the right and down the left of our thread take up. Now that's also important because the Bernette 38 and the Bernette 37, pretty much every time you stop sewing, that thread take up is either going to be in the highest position or the lowest position. And you might just want to make sure that it's in the highest position by pressing this quick needle up, needle down button that's available on both models. Now, of course, that is putting it down, and that's bringing it up. So now I just let the thread fall gently down here, and then we're ready to put it above the needle and into the needle. So now that we've got the thread down through this part of the guide, all we're gonna do is go behind this thread guide that's right here, and then to the left, and that's right in front of the needle. And now we're going to use the needle threader. Now the needle threader is slightly different going from the B37 to the B38, but they're relatively close enough. So I'm going to take my little lever here, push that down all the way. And you notice how my needle threader stays in that position? Then I'm going to wrap my thread around my needle threader, place it right in front of my needle, and it's even marked by that little red arrow. And now that thread is being held by a wire that's going through the back of the needle through the front with a little hook on the end. Now I'm gonna push my needle threader back up using my finger right here, and then I'm gonna let go of my thread. And that threads my machine, and I can just take my finger and grab the thread and pull my thread through. Let's take our first stitch. So when you turn the machine on, you're going to get a straight stitch. That's just how it's programmed. So if worse fails and you have to abandon ship, you can just turn your machine off and on again to get back to a straight stitch with the needle in the center position. So that's the very first stitch that we're gonna do. But let's learn how to read this screen. All right, so the folder with the 1 in it, that represents that we are in mode 1. Now to access some other stitches, you have a little tray of stitches and a little booklet that tells you what stitches are in mode 2, what stitches are in mode 3, and it goes all the way up with the Cyrillic alphabet. But for right now, if we wanted stitch number 1, we're going to press 1. To change it from mode 1 to mode 2 or mode 3 or mode 4, 5, or 6, we just press the red mode button on this little keyboard pad. And then once you're in mode 6, you press 1 more time, and we can see we're back into mode 1 and the straight stitch. This button here indicates making your stitch wider or narrower. This one is shorter or longer, and this one is some memory features. We're not going to get into that in this tutorial, but I promise you we will do this very soon. Now, we have some other buttons that are external here on the machine, and that's needle up down. You saw me use that earlier. The Bernette 38 does have the thread cutter option and double needle limitation option. So what this is a button that you press and it won't let you do a wider stitch than your 2mm double needle. Then you also have a sliding motor speed. We saw that we were able to use that with our bobbin winding, but it also goes for when we're doing regular sewing. Heading back over here to our number pad, you can see that mode 1 is going to pull stitches from these practical stitches. So we have a straight stitch in the middle, a straight stitch to the left, a triple straight stitch, super stretch, zigzag, running zigzag, automatic securing stitch, a little overcast stitch, a blind hem, and a buttonhole. This will access your memory stitches and help you use those capabilities. And then as we get into some more decorative stitches, there's a mirror stitch. So that means if a stitch is stitching like in this direction, you hit mirror and it will stitch in that direction. So that's your little tour. And then finally, there might be a few other things here by the head of the machine that you'll want to learn. Over here is our tension. Now normally I don't really move this too often from that number 4 setting, but basically you want to know that the tension should be balanced. So that means we don't see too much bobbin thread from the top and we don't see too much top thread from the bobbin. And a good rule is that if you see a bunch of thread vomit underneath, that's probably something going on with your upper thread and your upper thread threading. Either your presser foot's not down, you didn't thread the machine with the presser foot up, or something's just not threaded right. Same goes for if you see a lot of bobbin thread coming up to the top. If you see a lot of thread coming up to the top from the bottom, that's a bobbin thread issue and you want to investigate how you loaded the bobbin. Over here we have a knotting stitch, quick reverse, and stop start. You can sew with this machine without your foot control. It's not something that I have aspirations to do, but you do have that capability. I'm starting to sew, and the one thing I want to do is bring my bobbin thread up through the hole in the machine over here. So I'm just going to do that simply by pressing my needle up down button on the front of my machine and then bringing the needle up again. So I press that button twice, and now there's my bobbin thread. And now I can pull that through and get it under my foot. Now I'm using the straight stitch that I pointed out, and I'm just going to line this up and see there's our different seam allowances. Here I'm at 3/8 of an inch. Over here I'm at 5/8. That's if I'm going to sew a garment. That's where I want that seam allowance to be, but you always want to check your patterns to make sure that they're using the proper seam allowances or what seam allowances they're using. So now I'm just going to get started. Now, do you notice how my presser foot isn't down? Well, if I try to stitch, hear that? That is the machine telling me, hey, you better lower that presser foot. All right, I'm lowering my presser foot just like it wants me to do. And now I'm going to hold my threads because that's going to prevent little nesting underneath. But when I say hold my threads, I'm really just putting my little finger here and just gently encouraging them to lay flat. And now I'm going to start sewing. And I've gone a few stitches, and that's when I can use my quick reverse button here, hold it and sew backwards. And then stop, and then I can continue sewing forward. And then when I get to the end, I'm going to press and hold that same button, go backwards, go forwards, and stop. And notice how the needle is landing in the down position. That's really convenient when you want to pivot or move the fabric in some way. And if you want to lift that needle out to get started with your next row, it's super easy because the Bernette 38 has a thread cutter. So we can just press the thread cutter button and now lift my presser foot, and it's cut the thread and it's lifted the needle out of the fabric. This is a cute and very functional machine. Let's take another stitch that might make our lives a little bit easier. So if you're sewing garments together, you're sewing borders on a quilt, you might want to make sure that you secure those seams when you start and you end. Stitch number 7, I just select it simply by pressing stitch number 7, just like that. And now this one is going to eliminate the need for me to push this quick reverse button when I sew. See how it reversed itself automatically? When I get to the end, all I'm going to do is press my quick reverse button, and then the machine will go backwards for me and then automatically stop when it gets to the end. And that's really great because it prevents me having to take my hands off of the cloth while I'm sewing. And then I can just press my thread cutter, lift, and I'm ready to go. So let's look a little bit about how you would do a zigzag stitch and then turn your zigzag stitch into a satin stitch. Before we make any adjustments to our zigzag stitch, which is stitch number 5, I want to point out that the default setting is 3.5 wide and 1.5 long. All right, it starts by selecting stitch number 5 and adjusting the width and the length. Now the width is up to you, it's whatever you would like. I'm going to go ahead and turn mine into 2.5 millimeters wide. You can see as I changed it, that little number changes, and you can also see a little preview of what stitch I'm using right here. Then I'm going to use my stitch length to make it go pretty close together. I'm thinking probably about 0.4 for my stitch length. So now that's going to make it a really nice satin stitch. And also the machine, every time you pick a different stitch, it's going to recommend a presser foot, but there is a better presser foot for satin stitching. To do a nice satin stitch, I actually like to use this clear foot with the open toe. I can really see where I'm going with this one. And if you turn the foot upside down, you can see that it's notched out underneath to accommodate the raised satin stitching. And changing out the feet is pretty easy. There's a little lever on the back of the foot that drops the foot down, and then I'm just going to lower the presser foot back down on that little bar. And so now I've got my regular foot off and my satin stitch foot on. Can see here where I stitched out the default zigzag stitch for you, so you can see what that looks like. But now we're going to stitch out the regular satin, or now we're going to stitch out the satin stitch where you saw me make those adjustments on the machine. Lowering my presser foot and holding my thread. You can see that's pretty close together. But it makes a really nice stitch. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit wider and see how I like that. And now what's nice about these machines, the B37 and the B38, is that our stitch width can go pretty wide. So if you were trying to applique something on puffy material, or just something that you wanted to see the satin stitching wider, you can go all the way up to 7 millimeters wide. Just beware. Do you see how my fabric isn't tunneling or anything? There's no squeezing together. That's because I have an interfacing fused into my fabric here, and that's helping me get these really nice stitches without the fabric distorting. Okay, I think that's good enough. I'm going to cut and lift my presser foot. And now I can show you what we just made. Not too shabby. Let's look at some of the stitches in mode 3. These are where we get some of our really, kind of fun things. Some satin stitches, some floral stitches, little hearts. So I would really like to see what stitch number 37 stitches out like, which is that one right there. So let's go ahead and look at our stitch selection screen and pick the stitch and stitch it out. Like I had mentioned, this stitch lives in mode 3, so we're going to press the mode button until we get to the folder symbol with the 3 in it. And now this is stitch number 37, so all I have to do is press 3, 7. I get the preview of the stitch. It tells me how wide and the recommended width and the recommended length. So let's stitch this little bugger out. All right, let's see this guy. I like it. It's cute. Now I think it's time to make a buttonhole. And so this is the automated buttonhole foot for both the B37 and the B38. And the way that you can do your buttonholes is you either have a button, this one's like a 7/8 size button, so, or you can just kind of measure how big you're making your buttonhole here. In this case, I'm really not going to sew on a button. I'm actually going to use a buttonhole to weave ribbon through for a decoration. But let's just show you how you would put this in there. And then, so now that button is secure in our foot, and now this is going to go on the machine. So once again, we're going to pull that little lever to take our foot off, and then we're going to slip the foot on just like that. All right, now we're ready. So now we just need to select our buttonhole. We're going to be using a buttonhole from mode 2. So I'm going to have to adjust my machine to mode 2, and I'm going to select buttonhole number 23. Okay, I've placed it in mode 2, and now I want to hit 23, and that gives me that little oval type of buttonhole. Something to remember when you're making the buttonholes with the machines is they're going to make them from the front of the buttonhole to the back. So we're going to line up right here on the beginning of our buttonhole, just like that, right at the tip of that blue mark. All right, another thing that you need to do is pull your little buttonhole lever down so that it knows how to make the buttonhole. So now I'm going to make my buttonhole, and I'm going to just let the machine do everything for me. Okay, so it makes its little beep. It's time to cut. And now I can make another one right next to it. So there's our first buttonhole. Okay, let's do our other one. Lining it up in the same way that I did the first one. It's time to bring out our little apple core and our buttonhole cutter again, because I'm going to cut my buttonholes. We're going to start with the first one, and we're going to line it right in between those little stitches. Okay, and now we'll do it again with all three. Okay. All right, and now look at this cute ribbon that I'm going to weave through here. All right, so I have my bodkin or my elastic feeder fed with this cute little ribbon, and I'm going to just go in, out, and in through my cute little piece here. Ta-da! And put a little pair of scissors right in there, just like that. So can you imagine how cute this would be on the hem of a dress or something like that? I think it's pretty super cute. The best thing about these water-soluble pens is they come with an end that you can use to get rid of your blue marks. It's time to forget about the buttonholes and pick something else now. I am going to use stitch number 14, and I'm still in mode 2, to do a little overcasting around the edge of my blue material that has my ribbon in it. Look at this foot. I switched it to the overlock foot that comes with the machine. And what I'm doing here is I'm lining the edge of my blue material up to that pin. And as the machine stitches over those little pins, it's not going to tunnel on the edge, and it's going to give me a nice little overlock stitch. Whenever I try a new stitch like this, though, I do like to use my hand wheel, and I turn it in the sewing direction to just make sure that I'm missing my pins, and I am. So now it's safe to go. And this is something that you can use if you don't have a serger handy, just to save the edges of your seams. Now I'm going to go ahead and pivot and go all the way around all 4 corners. It's time to change the foot back to our open toe foot so we can see where we're going. There we go. And I'm going to line my presser foot kind of up with the edge of these buttonholes. And now I'm just going to stitch this stitch, starting with holding my thread, mode 3, and stitch number 38. All right, my little swirly swirly. Let's cut. One of the coolest things about this machine is it has this feature. That's mirror. So it's going to take that design that we just did and flip it. So let's go ahead and choose that, and then we're going to start at the beginning again and stitch on the other side of the buttonholes. All right, let's do it again down the other side. I've switched to a new stitch. This one is stitch number 58. It's still in mode 3. And now, once again, I'm going to use the side of my presser foot as a guide. All right, now I'm pretty happy with this. This is a great little border design. You can see here I have to maybe go around one more time to get some of my blue lines off, but I really think this is cute. And hopefully doing some of these decorative stitches and playing around with the buttonholes has inspired you to get creative with your new Bernette 38 or 37. Now, let's just take a moment to clean them out. The first thing you want to do when you're cleaning out your machine is unplug your foot control. Then we're going to use our special little screwdriver that's in here. Oh, I promise it's in here some way. Okay, here it is. So now we're going to use this to take the needle plate off. So you're just going to take your screwdriver and loosen these little screws right here. And you're going to take them all the way out. Now, the first time that you take these out, I'm not going to joke. Sometimes they can be in there a little tight, so just give it some elbow grease. Okay. Now, I'm just going to pop out the bobbin. Don't need that right now. And then that's going to help me take out our needle plate. There we go. And I'll tell you something. You can get thread down in this area, and so you want to take your dust brush that comes with your machine and you want to dust that out. Here's our dust brush. So you get the thread out from down in there, and then you can even pop out the hook, and sometimes you have to look for thread down in there, and then dust this off. And you know, you want to make sure that this is always nice and pointy and doesn't have any scratches, because if it does, you're probably going to need to replace it. So now we're going to just pop that little guy back down in place. My machine looks pretty clean, so I don't think I really need to do any more work down there. So the way that the needle plate comes off is the way that it goes back on there. And then you're going to put your little screws back in. And I kind of just get them in there with my fingers first, and then I'll tighten them down with my screwdriver. Easy peasy. Now, we paid a lot of attention to the Bernette 38, but here's our Bernette 37. You can notice, hey, winding a bobbin, threading the machine, cleaning out the bobbin area, and where you keep your accessories, it's all very similar on the Bernette 37. The only difference is we do not have a thread cutter, and we don't have some of the cute little things like mirroring a stitch and everything that the 38 has. And the stitch selection is a little bit different, but I think you can handle it because it's pretty simple. So just like in the Bernette 38, there is a little drawer that holds a card. And there's no mode 1, 2, or 3 on this machine. It's just the stitches that are numbered. So you're going to get these additional stitches here on the card, and then just like on the Bernette 38, there's also a bobbin winding, bobbin and threading piece. So here are our stitches for our Bernette 37. First of all, I want you to notice you do have a few buttonholes. You have some decorative stitches. Look, stitch number 40, that's the stitch that we did on the 38. And it's pretty easy to select a stitch with this one. So let's look over here at the launch pad of the Bernette 37. So if I want to pick stitch number 40, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that my cursor, that underline, is under the 0, because it's going to always start with a straight stitch when we turn on the machine. So I want to move this up to 4. Now, like I said, we're using stitch number 40, so now I'm going to move the cursor and I'm going to move this down to 0. So now I have selected stitch number 40 and I can stitch it out. Now, another thing about this is if I wanted to reduce the stitch width and the stitch length or increase it, I'm going to move my cursor over, and now you can see the underline is under the 7. So I can go ahead and make that 5.5 inches or millimeters wide, and then I can maybe even make it longer or shorter. And in this case, I only have a range. So for instance, when you hear that double beeping, that means, hey, this is the longest this stitch can go. And as I move it down, it's going to beep at me again and be like, hey, this is the shortest this stitch can go. But easy, right? And of course, you can do the same thing for the straight stitch. Now, people ask, well, how do I get back to a straight stitch? Well, if you're in full-on panic mode, you can just turn the machine off and on again. However, all you have to do is move your cursor over to the 4 and go down until it says 0. Then move your cursor over and go up until it says 1. Easy. Well, I hope you make something fun with your Bernette. As you can see here, I really do dig our little samples that we made. It helped inspire me at any rate. And please check out some of our other videos. So if you want to stay tuned and subscribe to everything that we're doing here at Bernina of Naperville, don't forget to check out our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville. And you can comment. We love to hear what's on your mind. Like, who doesn't like to be liked? And if you want an alert every time we upload a video like this one, just click the little bell. But in the meantime, stay curious and keep sewing.